Welcome everybody to Bugbears and Brews, and we're going to go ahead and recap encounter number 7 of our Storm King Thunders campaign. So we had a smaller group this time around. 2 people couldn't make it due to family issues, and then I think a third guy was packing for vacation, so we were down to 4 versus 7. This led me to have to do a lot of rebalancing because initially I found out that 2 weren't making it, so I had everything balanced for 7 people, found out 2 weren't making it, rebalanced everything like literally within a minute of me finishing that. Tom, who is Trevor's dad, said, hey, Trevor's not making it tonight either, so I had to rebalance once again. Luckily, going from 4 to 5 isn't that big of a deal, but it's still a little bit of a tweaking I had to do there. So that being said, I think everything felt pretty balanced the way I wanted it to feel, so really happy with that. And I had a lot of fun with this session, too. Having a smaller group, I think a lot of people got a lot of focus time there. So starting off, you guys went into the mountains, or Somber Hills, to try to find these hill giants, and mainly for their ears, and then also maybe they might know something about Pavic's friendly rival there, Narcella Onyxarm. Heading up into the mountains, you guys first came across a valley. I think it was like 2 days out into the mountains, and this valley, or actually let me backtrack here for a minute. Going into the mountains, you notice that like everything's picked over. There's no shrubbery, there's no berries, there's no small game, there's nothing. Like anything that's edible is not around. Now jumping back to that valley, getting down to that, or you guys were up on an edge or ledge on the valley, overlooking a giant, and the giant was playing essentially fetch with a boar. You couldn't quite tell what they're playing fetch with, but it clearly wasn't a ball because giants don't have balls. Okay. That kind of came out a bit wrong, but they don't have like tennis balls or baseballs, those kinds of things that you normally would play catch with in real life. And you guys devised a plan of tricking the giant into chasing you guys. Well, let's see here. It was going to be Grimlock would do the beating the bait, since Grimlock is the quickest, and then everybody else would wait and hide and attack the giant when the giant got up there, and that worked really well. I think 2 out of the 3 of you, 2 out of 3 of you got a surprise round on that, and the giant went down pretty quick. I think there was a couple hits here and there, but nothing monumental. And you guys were able to carry on pretty easily without having to take a rest after that. The one thing I will say is that you guys sprung your plan shortly after the giant threw the ball, and that way you wouldn't have to deal with the boar. When the boar came back up, it didn't care that the giant was unconscious, because you guys didn't kill the giant. You just knocked him unconscious, because part of the things you realize as you're fighting him is he seemed to be a bit more childlike, whether he's a simpleton or a child that you don't know, but he definitely showed a bit more childlike in sentence structure and content of what he was saying to you guys, as well as just his looks in general. So it turned out that the ball was a head. I don't recall what race we said the head was, but Pavic, being a head ball player from the days of yesteryear, went ahead and threw perfect head spiral, and the boar went and chased after it. And so anytime the boar would come up, Pavic was throwing the head while you guys looked over the giant's goodies. Looking in his bag, it had, I think it was a brush for the boar to get its hair all nice and clean, a picket from a picket fence, a bit of a pumpkin, and then all sorts of rotted food. You did surgically cut off the giant's left ear because you guys wanted that 35 gold. So you didn't make it nice. You even sewed it up afterward, and so he's not going to be bleeding to death or anything like that there. As you guys went on, though, the boar kind of started to follow you guys, especially once you started giving it rations and giving it a bit of what was in the sack, mainly though the pumpkin that was left. You guys gave the boar the pumpkin, the boar went nuts. And the boar hung out with you for the most part until you came around to kind of a gulch there, and the boar wouldn't go in, just started grunting and trying to get away, and eventually just took off, didn't care about you guys. And I will say, for those that weren't there, this boar was a giant boar, so think of a large creature bigger than you guys. So there was no stopping this boar. Its intentions were to get the hell away from whatever this area was, so that's what it did. Turns out, going around the corner, maybe about another 5 minutes or so, you found what believes to be the giant's den, because there was as I described him, a dirt-stashed giant hanging out front, so you're guessing that he was somewhere in his like teenage years. He had a nice little dirt stash going on there. And you guys try to use the same trick of, luring him in. And this giant thought he was pretty smart, so when Grimlock tried to do the whole lure thing, he purposely, like, don't see you. But he was being really obvious that he was trying not to look at you guys. So even though he was smart about not falling into the trap, he was really dumb about showing that really he knows you guys were there when he's trying to reverse a trap on you guys. He wasn't that smart. And you guys were able to actually coax him into combat by shooting him in the calf with a bolt. He hurt a bit more than the dumb giant, or the slow child giant, whatever he was there. I wasn't planning on making that first one a childlike giant. I think it's going to be more simpleton, but when Tim mentioned it, I was like, sure, let's run with that. That's good. So thanks on that one, Tim. That one, though, the Dirt Stash Giant hurt a bit more. I also did describe him as being a bit more grotesque. He was, when you guys were watching him, he was digging in his nose and then took that same finger and was wiping in his ear, and then I think he went down to his belly button and then into his mouth. And I remember one time Grimlock punched him and came back with a fistful of belly flap from under cheese. So that was really nice and descriptive there. This one, you had no issues killing. I think mid-combat, I did a lot of description of this giant was a lot different than that previous giant. He was out to eat you guys, where the other giant was, talking through that giant's voice. He was much more like, hey, what are you guys doing? Why are you hurting me? And so on. That giant there, the Dirt Stash Giant, like I said, he connected a couple times. So between what the younger giant did and the Dirt Stash Giant, you guys needed a short rest. So you find a nice little alcove in the gulch there. Took a short rest, but partway through, a quartet of goblins came through, and they were going to sneak right by you. Everybody passed their stealth checks. Like, even with disadvantage, I think the lowest roll was like a 17. It's beautiful. And then Pavic said, I cast Thunderwave. And I explained to him, well, you can do this, but you are in a gulch, and that's going to reverberate, and it's going to be really loud because Thunderwave already has a very thunderous clap to it. So adding that magnified in the gulch there is going to be really intense. He didn't care, so he blasted the goblins. 3 out of the 4 of them died instantly. The other one died a second later due to an Eldritch Blast to the head. But I think everybody but Tim, as Thessalon, wound up getting tinnitus from Pavic doing that in the gulch. Nice ringing in the ear for a while there. From there, short rest was finished up, and you went into the giant cave. Looking in the giant cave, you heard some scraping and that kind of stuff coming from one direction. And when I think it was Grimlock that went and kind of peeked his head around there, he saw another quartet. I think it was another 4 set of goblins that were shoveling giant shit to this one sort of large bug. Okay. And then the other way was kind of bearskin rugs and that kind of thing, making like a fake wall or entranceway. And peering into there, you guys saw a rather large giant, or at least its legs, sitting down, and some goblins kind of running up and down it. So that led Thessalon to believe, like, hey, I'm going to go ahead and become a goblin myself with his disguised self, and went in and tried to assess the situation. The first thing that he noticed, because Pavic goes on and on and on and on and on and on about Torm, was that this giant was wearing a gauntlet on one of his hands, and on the back of that gauntlet had the Eye of Torm on it. So with that, he went back and told the group what's going on and said, hey, there's a giant in there. It's not just like a statue or anything. It's not a dead giant. Goblins are feeding him grapes and massaging his head and giving him shoulder rubs and all that kind of stuff. What's going on? Oh, by the way, he also has a gauntlet of Torm on. From there was a bit of discussion about how to properly do this, because they know that they were already getting hurt by those small giants pretty well, so this big giant was not going to be a cakewalk. They knew that going in. That was awesome. And so they decided to do a bit of role play, and Tim, as Thessalon, went back in via Goblin and was like massaging the giant's toes while he's doing this. And of course, I'm describing how awful these giant's toes are. He's wrapping a rope around the giant's feet, and he gets it around one leg, and he goes and starts on the other leg, and he actually ties his arm in the rope. And so that drew the giant's attention as Tim was, Thessalon was trying to pull his arm out. And the giant said, oh, you know what, we're going to play stuff. And he grabbed every goblin that was around and stuffed the goblins in his mouth. And then all the goblins were like, oh, crap, this asshole's up to this again. And started kind of picking at the goblin's teeth from the inside to like get the stuff out. So kind of like a giant dental floss via goblin. He spit each of the goblins out, or the giant spit each of the goblins out shortly after that, and didn't like how the job was done, so he grabbed one more giant at random, which just happened to be Thessalon, and went back in there. And at this point, Thessalon, I believe is where this occurred, started to use his telepathy to communicate with the giant and pretend that he was the giant's god, speaking to him through his mouth, much like, what was the movie we were discussing, where the guy was talking to him through the filling and the radio frequencies? Genius. Yeah, that's much like Real Genius. That worked out pretty well, and so the giant was really starting to believe that this was his god talking to him, and Tim Thessalon was saying, hey, there's going to be some people coming, don't bother them, don't move a muscle, just hang tight. That worked out well for the most part, or it wasn't don't move a muscle, it was don't fight them. So instead of the giant fighting, he grabbed all the goblins and started throwing them through the curtain, including Thessalon via goblins, spit him out in the mouth and threw them through the curtain there. And Thessalon was actually the first one through the curtain, if I recall, and almost caught Pavic's axe to the head, but then Pavic, or Thessalon turned back into an elf right before the axe hit. From there, combat was on. I don't think you guys had any issues with the goblins. I think a couple of them hit you here and there, but those weren't really the big issues there. Vander decided to scoot around the other side, and it's kind of interesting because the bug that was there was a carrion crawler. I don't think the party actually knew what it was, even metagame-wise. And Vander, I was not planning on using the bug was one of the things that was going to be there, but it was one of the things I removed from toning out. But going right by this bug, I decided, you know what, this bug wouldn't just hang tight. It's going to go ahead and look after, try to get this tasty morsel that is not a goblin and not a giant there. So Vander and the carrion crawler went one-on-one, and I have to say, for Vander being a level 4 character, I think he got the bug down to 4 or 8 hit points without any assistance whatsoever, and things were looking really grim until somebody else from the giant fight, because this was going on in tandem, so there's groups fighting the giant, and then Vander fighting this bug one-on-one on the other side there. I think it was Gramak that came in and killed the bug at the end. I might be wrong on that one, though. Back to the giants, though. So when you guys came in there was a bit more of, hey, I'm your god, you're not supposed to move, you weren't supposed to throw those goblins. And the giant was really upset about that, but let the Thessalon, now once again disguised as a goblin, to finish tying up his feet, and then went back up top and tried to coup de grace him by stabbing him down with, I think, his rapier or something like that. The giant let it happen the one time, and he started, yelling to your god, and his god, like, why are you letting me do this? And Thessalon, via the god voice in his head, is saying, oh, just shut up and take getting stabbed. And the giant was okay with it for a second, but the second time that Thessalon tried to do the coup de grace on the giant, he couldn't take it anymore. He, being the giant, couldn't take it anymore and just threw Thessalon off him. And that's when the giant decided it's going to go ahead and start combat, actually fighting, versus fighting through its minions. Although the giant didn't move. It didn't leave its space. So it stayed where it's at. It had a huge reach, though, and you guys kept on coming up close to it. In the end, though, tactical retreat was what you guys opted for. Thessalon played this off as the giant god voice head thing, saying, hey, these guys are now leaving. They just want to test your strength or something like that. I don't remember the exacts behind it. You passed. Hang out right there. You'll be rewarded. And then the 4 party members headed out to try to go find some place to recover from the ass beating they got, because I don't think between any of them there was more than like 20 hit points. I think Gramak was down to 1, Vander was down to like 7, Thessalon was down pretty low as well as Pavic, so everybody was down pretty low. That being said, though, I think everybody understood the danger that it was and had a lot of fun with the fight. And I felt leaving last Wednesday that there was a lot of good vibes on how that session was handled. There's a lot of good role play, a lot of combat. There was a lot, but we went 1, 2, 3, 4, I think 5 different combats. 4 or 5, depending on how you tally up the giant fight and all that. So a lot of combat. So for those that missed it, you missed a lot of combat. Sorry. There's still going to be combat coming in. Don't let's not lie. There's going to be lots of combat still going on, but you missed a lot of combat. So yeah, let me know what you guys thought about this this little side trek into the mountains. And I'm really looking forward to concluding the giant fight next week. I'm taking it that we'll have a couple extra party members, as those other party members that were described as looking for the giant cave hideout in other parts of the Sombre Hills. We'll meet up with you. That's my guess. So take care, guys, and I will see you next week. Bye.